and welcome to another episode of Street Biashara. I'm your one and only host, Brenda Nyamichaba. Since the operationalization of the cap on interest rates in 2016, there has been talks on whether it needs to be repealed or not, owing the fact there has been a cut on credit flow to SMEs in the Kenyan economy, with latest 2019 data showing the sector growing at a marginal 5.2%. Accountants are now pushing for a 2-year extension on low capping interest rates, insisting that its full benefits are yet to be realized. With half-year results of the banking sector 2019 showing a profit of 85 billion Kenyan shillings, the talk on the effects of the cap on interest rates on the Kenyan banks has failed to get a proper grounding. The Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya told Parliament the law on rate caps has instilled discipline in the economy in general. Now, the term we're looking at today is, what are interest rates? Let's go and find out what your interesting answers are.
Interest rates. Yeah, it's also a percentage that banks or any other institution use to, maybe if you get a loan, there's an interest rate that you will pay after on the principal.
The rate at which you return to the bank, it can be set like from like 6% in the usually banks, or when from public banks whereby it's at a set rate of 14%. This is whereby the money that's added percentage is whereby you return to the bank, or when you return the money.
Near mtu towards something.
It's a percentage of how money is changed from a currency to another.
Interest ni after business nini pesa unapata chu, hiyo ndio interest.
Interest rates, I think that would be the percentage of okay, this is a bit hard, but I would assume it's the percentage of money that is increased, say, on a savings account or maybe on a loan.
I think it's like a service fee that a bank applies for maybe keeping your money.
Interest rates, I can define it as interesting. Simple but difficult to answer. Interest
Can you give me an
rate.
example where it happens, where it takes place when we find interest rates?
Majorly in the banks, or banks or lending institutions, SACCOs. If you save, I'm sure they pay you in interest, or your money grows in interest.
Interest rates, the rates that banks or money lending organizations charge you on top of your loan.
Now that I've gotten the chance to get to see what you understand about the term interest rates, it's time for us to get a clear understanding from an expert about what interest rates are. Now, joining me today on Street Biashara is financial expert Mr. John Ochieng, and he's going to help us have a clear breakdown on what interest rates are. Now, Mr. John, I just want you to tell us in the most simplest terms, what is an interest rate?
So interest rate is in two perspectives. It's the price paid for use of borrowed funds. Like when you go to a bank to borrow money, you'll pay a price for it. So when that's expressed as a percentage of the principal, it becomes your interest rate. And another perspective is that interest rate is the rate of return earned by an investor. When you buy, let's say you put your money in a fixed deposit account in a bank, they'll give you, let's say 70% of the CBR. So that's the rate of return that you get.
Okay.
So that's another way to look at interest rate.
Okay, wonderful. Now, how do Kenyan banks set interest rates?
So generally, interest rate is set by looking at we look at the rate of return that you'll get from a risk-free investment, for instance, the treasury bills. And then, because you are giving out money to someone who is not the government, then you have to put in an element of risk.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'll add an element of a risk premium. So of late, especially since September 2016, there is a ceiling in terms of the maximum amount that banks can charge. So there's the central bank rate, which is the base lending rate, that banks are supposed to have. Then they add an element of the risk premium, which in this case should not exceed 4%.
Okay.
Yeah, so like currently the CBR is about 9%. So it means the maximum that bank can charge is 13%, 9 plus 4, which is 13%.
Okay, wonderful. Now, what effect has the cap on interest rates had on performance of commercial banks so far?
Yeah, when the cap kicked in, in September 2016, I think there was a lot of panic from the financial sector, even the banks, because previously they were charging, there was a lot of spread. You find the spread was over 10%. But then the government came up with this regulation. So one of the things that affected banks, one of the ways it affected banks is that it reduced their spread in terms of what they could earn from the amount of loans that they advanced to to private sectors, that's individuals and other companies. So that in a way affected their performance, because what we noted is that between 2017 2018, the performance of banks, there was a decline in their performance, because previously they were relying on interest income to make, which contributed to a larger percentage of their profitability. So when the spread reduced, it affected them negatively. Yes.
Okay. Now, most banks this year were able to register some kind of profitability. Does this mean that they've found a way to operate around the cap?
Yeah, what banks came to learn is that the cap is here. It is here. There have been a lot of demand to have the cap lifted, so that then we continue operating as normal. But it is still there with us. So banks, what they did, they diversified. That instead of relying on interest income, they ventured into how do we make money from non-interest income sources. And one of the things that banks did is that they increased their commission fees. They increased their fees. And one thing that I've noticed is that banks right now have entered into bank assurance arrangement with insurance companies. So it means that they are getting money from various sources. And another key thing is, right now, if a bank gives out money to individuals, the spread is very small. So what banks have done now is that they have increased their appetite for the securities that are issued by the government. Because they say instead of lending money to an individual, and the spread probably is 5%, why don't I lend money to the government where I will get, let's say if the government issues a treasury bill at 8%, 9% or 10%, you find they make more money. And I think through that, what we've seen is that over the last, since 2016 up to now, there's been an increase in terms of purchase of government securities by the banks that we have locally. So they have found a way to make money despite the interest rate cap.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Echeng, for that information. Well, there you have it, a clear explanation of what interest rates are. Well, I do hope you've learned a lot, because I will come outside and ask you exact same term. Do join me again on the next episode of Street Biashara as we get to learn more business and financial terms.